Hi guys, welcome back to Dialogue, the dialogue on analog music reproduction. In this episode, we're gonna see the main elements that will help you to choose the correct tapes for the correct machine, and vice versa. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Okay guys, finally back to reel tapes and recorders. In this video we're gonna concentrate on playback, okay? The most important aspects you have to look out in order to easily and properly reproduce your tapes, in order to combine them, to match them with the machine, or vice versa. As I said before, I mean, if you already have a machine, you gotta know which kind of tapes you are able to play with them, or you have a group of tapes and you have to know which kind of machine you need to play them back. That's the basic aspect, the basic instructions you're going to find in this video. Okay, so we're going to go through 7 main points where I think we're touching the most important aspects. A few of these, obviously, I've already touched them and explored them actually more in depth in other videos I did on reel-to-reel. Here is the starting point on the 4-track type. Then there are other links for the 2-track type, because that's the macroscopic differentiation, the separation between the we could say pre-recorded or consumer environment and pro environment, respectively. Okay, let's start. Okay, number one aspect, number one element to keep into consideration: speed. Clearly, you probably already know this, but I had to start from there. Yes, you must look out for specific speeds. You may find tapes, especially pre-recorded tapes, usually of high quality, which are at 7.5 inch per second. Okay, otherwise you can find also at a much lower quality 3 3/4 inch per second speed, like this from the Rolling Stones, and the difference is quite noticeable. Absolutely. So try to go for these if you are in eBay, on internet, on the hunt for pre-recorded tapes, because that's the starting point for many of us. I perfectly understand that. Obviously the price is going to go much higher, so it depends. Clearly, it depends also from your machine, because your machine has to be capable of dealing with these speeds. Besides these 2 speeds that you're going to find for the typical old pre-recorded tapes, you're also going to find the professional speed of 15 inch per second. There's also 30 inch per second, but we don't care about that much. I mean, it's very rare. The sonics are not excellent in the lower register, so 15 inch per second is the standard for high quality and pro material. Basically, the rule is that a higher speed increases the frequency response, while instead the width, a higher width of the tape will increase the dynamic range. I think both aspects are present in both elements, okay? So the dynamic range and the frequency response do increase with higher speeds and with a bigger width of the tape. A little more dynamic range in the width, a little more frequency response in the speed, okay? This is just to give you my take on this aspect. In any case, let's immediately say that the standard is 1/4 inch tape, usually, like for these or other professional ones or master tapes themselves, and 7.5, the best for pre-recorded, 15 inch per second for master tape copies or high quality productions or pro environment, okay? Let's proceed. Point number 2, equalization. Now, we have 2 macroscopic equalizations. Again, if you can get a tape recorder, if you still have to choose it, which has IEC and NAB. These are the 2, IEC and NAB. These are the 2 standards. IEC is more present in Europe, while NAB is more present in the US. IEC is better. it has just better results. It's a better equalization curve. That's why a lot of modern productions are done with that curve. In any case, a lot of times you can customize that. You can ask for a specific equalization curve, even if the original recording was different. They can change that. In any case, it's better. It's just easier to have both in your machine. But not all machines have that, especially if you're buying something in the US. It's probably not even going to say anything, and it's automatically NAB. The same we could say for European machines or machines bought in Europe. Pre-recorded tapes, I would say 90%, all of these that you're going to find are NAB. Actually, I would say almost all. Just a few may have been done with a different equalization, but the standard is NAB. So think about it, because if you have an IEC machine, you're not going to have a proper reproduction. There's going to be issues in the frequency response, even in the timbre of sometimes. So it's better to follow these standards. Otherwise, as I said, you're not going to have high quality reproduction. Let's proceed. Point number 3, one of the most difficult and hard to understand, the number of tracks and the number of channels. Now, when we speak of number of tracks, we're mainly referring to tape. For example, these, the pre-recorded classical ones, are 4-track, okay? Usually, these are 4-track. Nevertheless, you can find 2-track pre-recorded tapes of the same shape. And in most cases, when it's 2 tracks, it's not very easy to find. Because as you can see here, the 4 is nice and chubby. It's present all over the place, no problem. In other cases, sometimes you're going to find written stacked or in line. Those are for 2 heads. 2 tracks, I'm sorry. Obviously, you also got changing point of view. If you have a machine, you have to check what kind of heads, because clearly a head which is meant for 4-track is not meant for 2-track. In some cases, you're going to find machines with dedicated heads for both of them. It is true that with a 4-track head, you can play back 2-track, but you're losing something along the road. So I do not recommend that. Get a dedicated head for dedicated tracks. And what is this difficulty with channels? Channels regard mainly the machines, the tape recorders, okay? Usually the standard clearly is 2 channels, because stereo, left and right, clearly. But you may find 4-channel or 8-channel machines. That doesn't mean you have to look for 4-track or 8-track tapes. Not at all. Absolutely. That's just an indication that you can record 4 distinct or 8 distinct, or if you're going in the pro environment, 16, 32 individual channels. And that's, as you can imagine, very helpful if you want to record first your guitar, and afterwards you're the same person doing the keyboards, and afterwards the drums. You can do that with tape. That is fantastic. You just have to go back, rewind, and change channel. That's why there are multiple channels, or all together, no problem. But we're talking about playback, okay? So if you want to play back something with 2 tracks, get a true track. Limited to that 2-track machine, in my opinion, absolutely, and not only in my opinion. Instead, if you're looking just to play back the pre-recorded classical 4-track, you can easily find a 2-channel machine. Yes, absolutely. You don't have to look for 4-channel. That's not useful. That's just for recording, okay? Get out of that. And when we're talking about like this one, my Philips, this is a 4-track machine. And as you can see, there's only 2 view meters. That's something helpful to understand how many channels a tape recorder has. If it has 4 VU meters, it means it has 4 channels, etc., etc. So that's a good index. In any case, this, as you can see, it has just 2 channels, but it's going to clearly read 4-track. And usually it is 4-track because it has 2 channels in one way, stereo, and 2 channels in the other way. Or turning back to recording, I could record just 1 channel, or I could record just 2 channels independently, and on and on. But as I said, I want to keep this video on the playback side. So for recapping once again, if you want to play back something with 4 tracks, you're just going to need to get a 4-track machine, not a 4-channel. I think that's pretty easy. Okay, let's proceed. Point number 4, strictly connected to point number 3, the track or the gap on the head width, clearly. Tape usually, as I said before, is 1/4 of an inch. These are all 1/4 of an inch, whether they're 4-track, whether they're 2-track. Master tapes, these are also 1/4 of an inch. It is very rare to go outside of this, okay? If we're talking about mono tapes, maybe you're going to go up to 1 inch, 1.5 inches. If we're talking about multiple tracks, because maybe you found a session tape where they needed a lot of tracks in order to record different types of instruments, voices, etc., then maybe you're going to find a 2-inch tape, which are very, very tall. Obviously, you're going to need a capable, proper head in order to read a 2-inch tape, that fat baby over there. But that's something mainly for recording. I mean, you're not going to find, unless you have a nice collection of session tapes with multiple tracks, then you're not going to need that type of the machine. The classic machine to enjoy pre-recorded tapes or master tape copies are 1/4 of an inch, the classical ones. As here, as you can see, I wanted to show you, this is just a classic master tape copy, nothing special. Here we're starting to have a copy of a production directly sold from a house. I did a video on my entire collection. Here's the link. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that. I went through my whole collection, practically almost all. And there is a link also in the video description. When I say that here's a link, you're also every time going to find the link here below. And here, for example, see they put a nice little picture of the album. Here there's a lot of information. A nice metal spool, something a little more professionally done. And this is 2-track. This is 2-track as well as an original master tape. This is an original master tape of an album called Beelzebub. Unfortunately is on Ampix and it suffers from sticky syndrome. Be careful of that. I'm not going to go in depth on this aspect. Nevertheless, I just want to warn you, Ampix is not a good choice, unfortunately, especially certain kinds of formulas. In any case, I would avoid that because unfortunately the oxide it became over time gooey, so it's leaving a lot of tape all over the tape drive and mechanisms, so on the capstan, on a pinch roller, on all the different transport parts. So be aware. I played this, it's fantastic, but a lot of goo came off. It's decreasing dB information every time I play it, so it's better just to do a copy when you're in that position. But apart from that, here you have all the different indications, 15 inch per second, and this was, used to cut the LP, and it's, as I said, a 2-track tape with 1/4 of an inch width. I hope you're starting to understand a little bit more what to look out for. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, point number 5. An important thing to look out in order to have a good compatibility between your tapes or future tapes and your recorder or future recorder is the magnetic flux of tapes. Now, I'm not going to go in depth. Let's just say that the magnetic flux is the strength of the magnetic signal recording on the tape. When it's very high, you're going to need a pro machine. Usually, we can see where things split is consumer machines usually go at 185 nanowebers. That's how you express magnetic flux. 185 or lower is usually consumer. In pro environment, you're going to go to usually 250, 320, all the way up also to 520. Now, usually the more the best if you have a machine capable of dealing with that. because you're just going to have more dynamic range and much less noise. So the signal to noise ratio is going to increase a lot. So it's a good idea, but you need a tape, also a tape, because if you start to record on 520 nanowebers, you need a very good tape, like an SM900 of recording the masters. If you get a crappy old tape, and that's important, talking about recording, if you get something coming from who knows where, not very capable of dealing that, it's not going to come out good. So it's a balance in that sense. Going back to playback, you have to make sure that your machine is capable of dealing with that. For example, I had a Revox, a B77, which is maybe considered almost professional. It's a prosumer, we could say. Well, with that, I could not play my master tape copies. They were too strong. So the best would be to aim directly to something capable of dealing with everything, clearly. If instead you have some tapes with a strong magnetic flux, you don't even try to play them on, I don't know, base of the line, Akai, Technics, Philips, or whatever. You have to go up. And it's difficult to find this value, actually. And sometimes when you're ordering your master tape copies, you can ask the guy to set this parameter. He probably has his machine calibrated in a certain way, but if he knows what he's doing, and if he has calibration tapes, he can change that easily, more or less, and lower the magnetic flux in order so you can play back that master tape copy on your system. So keep your eyes open on this aspect. Okay, let's proceed. Point number 6, something very simple, but we must bear this in mind, is the dimension of the spools, obviously, because if you have a small machine, you're probably going to be able to play only like the 5 or 7 inch. While instead, if you want to play the big ones, the 10.5 inch spools, then at that point, you're going to need a bigger machine that is capable of accepting that dimension. For example, I had a Nagra, and that's even more difficult. It cannot accept these big spools over here. You have to buy an adapter that costs even more than the machine practically. So always bear in mind also this aspect that sooner or later you are going to want to try to play something bigger. Obviously, there's also more material on a bigger spool, so it's just better to have a machine that is capable of dealing with everything, because clearly if it's a big machine, it can deal also with the teeny tiny ones. Let's proceed. Point number 7, our last point. Make sure, and this is easily to correct, you have the right adapters on your machine, and by checking also the shape of the spool, because usually you're going to find something, if we're talking about, for example, a pre-recorded, you're going to find this, the Trident or Cine or Cine type, okay? This very small little hole, and that's the typical type of actually film. That's why it's called Cine, because from the cinema type of spools. So you can easily find that. Almost all of them have that. But in most cases, when you're going up to the 10.5 spools, you are going to find something like this. See? With this big, large hole. Now for this, you're going to need an NAB adapter, the NAB adapter, which can be easily found on the web. But you have to make sure then that a NAB adapter can be fixed on your machine. But usually, all of them can. So, it's very rare they cannot accept that. So don't worry. A little more difficult is the AEGDIN type, which is usually employed for pancakes. And here you can see an example. See? Let me take it out for you, because otherwise you can't understand correctly. See here? Ooh. You have this type of large hole and these 2 small holes. You need a dedicated adapter for that. Otherwise, it's practically impossible to play it. So make sure you have those. There are also some combinations. Take a look to that video I did. It's in 2 parts on 2-track reel-to-reel. I really go in depth on all these aspects. Here's the link. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this brief guide on playback. Let me know your comments on this aspects. If you have other suggestions or if you have other questions on the topic, I'll try to answer here below, because as you know, this is a dialogue, not a monologue. Thank you again for watching, and remember, music is born analog.
Well guys, if you're enjoying my videos and you're enjoying my channel, please consider to subscribe by clicking the black and white logo here below. Also, don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode and you will become a true member of the analog community.